One night in October 2018, a strange 911 call echoed through the Barron, Wisconsin dispatch center. The caller said nothing, but screams and gunshots could be heard in the background. When police arrived just 4 minutes later, both parents of 13-year-old Jayme Closs were dead. The girl had vanished without a trace. A door was broken, bodies were left behind, and there were no clear clues. For the next 88 days, the entire nation followed the search for the kidnapped girl, while she was being held beneath a bed in a remote wooden cabin over 100 kilometers away from the crime scene. At around 12:53 a.m. on October 15, 2018, a 911 call lasting exactly 48 seconds was made from the cell phone of Jayme Closs, Jayme's mother. In that call, the dispatcher couldn't hear any clear voice, but loud noises, screaming, and metallic clanging were audible. The dispatcher immediately sent police officers to the Closs family home on 13th Avenue in the town of Barron, Wisconsin. At that time, no one suspected they were about to uncover one of the most brutal and bizarre abduction cases America had seen in over a decade. Just 4 minutes after the call, the first officer arrived at the scene. He found the front door broken, shattered glass everywhere, and clear signs of violence. As he stepped inside, he saw the body of Jayme Closs, Jayme's father, slumped in the doorway. He had been shot at close range with no time to react. Police moved further inside and discovered the body of the mother, Jayme Closs, shot in the bedroom. What baffled investigators was that Jayme Closs, the 13-year-old girl, had completely disappeared. There were no signs of a struggle, no blood trail, no evidence suggesting she had run away or been injured. The family car was still there, the phone was left inside, and there was no forced entry from the back. The killer hadn't taken anything except for Jayme. The Amber Alert system was activated immediately. Hundreds of officers were deployed. Every corner of Barron, a small town of just over 3,000 residents, was searched. Neighbors, classmates, teachers, and anyone who had interacted with Jayme were interviewed. The FBI joined the case the very next day and offered a $50,000 reward for any information. But surveillance footage, traffic cameras, GPS routes, none provided any leads. No vehicle was seen fleeing the area, no eyewitnesses, no tire marks, nothing. What made the investigation even more difficult was the complete lack of motive. Jayme and Jayme Closs were factory workers at the Jennie-O turkey plant, kept to themselves, had no enemies, no debts, no criminal history. Jayme was an 8th grade student, had no public social media, no romantic involvement, no known bad influences. This was a family that blended into the background. So why were they targeted? Why were the parents murdered and only the teenage daughter taken? Several theories were considered: organized trafficking, personal revenge, mistaken identity, or even a random home invasion. But there was no evidence supporting any of them. Meanwhile, Jayme left no trace of life. No calls, no card activity, no sightings. The public began to fear she was dead. Television analysts and crime experts appeared daily on CNN and ABC to break down the case, and most reached the same conclusion. The chances of survival beyond 72 hours were extremely low. But Jayme was still alive. She was being hidden under a bed inside a wooden cabin deep in the woods near Gordon, over 100 kilometers away from the crime scene, without phone service, without internet, without neighbors. And the man keeping her there was Jake Thomas Patterson, a 21-year-old with no criminal record, no previous contact with the Closs family, and no reason to be suspected. Jake Patterson didn't know Jayme. He had no connection to the Closs family. According to his later confession, he had only seen her once when she was getting on a school bus while he was briefly employed at the Genio plant. In that moment, he thought, she's the one. From then on, Patterson began planning. He shaved his head to avoid leaving DNA, dressed in black, removed the license plates from his car, and made multiple trips to the Closs residence to scout out the layout, surveillance cameras, and lighting. On the night of October 15th, he parked several hundred meters from the house, carrying a Mossberg shotgun. He walked up to the front door. When Jayme Closs opened it, he shot him in the chest without saying a word. He moved further inside, found Denise and Jayme hiding in the bathroom. Denise clutched her daughter and tried calling 911, but there was no time. He broke the door, ordered Denise to bind Jayme with duct tape, then shot her dead in front of her daughter. He then dragged Jayme outside, placed her in the trunk of his car, and drove north, taking rural routes with no surveillance, to his family's cabin. During the more than 1 hour-long drive, Jayme had no idea where she was. She couldn't see outside, she couldn't scream, she had no sense of time or direction. When they arrived, Patterson kept her in a bedroom with an old bed and minimal furniture, completely sealed from light. Every time someone visited or he had to leave, he ordered Jayme to hide under the bed. He surrounded her with heavy objects, water jugs, concrete blocks, furniture, so she couldn't escape. Every movement was monitored. If she made a sound, he would destroy things or deprive her of food as punishment. Days passed. Jayme began to lose hope, but Patterson never sexually assaulted her. According to both the suspect's confession and Jayme's statements, there was no sexual contact. He kept her solely to exert total control. And in silence, Jayme began to memorize every detail: the cabin's layout, engine sounds, Patterson's routines. Each hour was preparation for the only chance she'd ever get to escape. On day 88, when Patterson told her he'd be gone for a few hours, Jayme knew her moment had finally come. If she didn't act now, there might never be another chance.
On January 10th, 2019, exactly 88 days after she disappeared, Jayme Closs escaped her captivity. That day, Jake Patterson told her he'd be out for a few hours to take care of something, without giving details. When the cabin door shut and the sound of his car engine faded into the distance, Jayme knew she had just one chance. She crawled out from under the bed, where she had been forced to hide for hours whenever anyone came by, and ran for the door. She wore old clothes, no shoes, no phone, and had nothing to protect herself. She fled the cabin, cut across the edge of the woods, and ran without knowing where she was, until she encountered a woman named Jean Nutter, a local resident walking her dog. Jayme looked at her and said, "I'm Jayme Closs. I don't know where I am. I need help." Jean took her to a neighbor's house nearby, owned by Peter and Kristen Kasinskas, and called 911. Police arrived within minutes. Jayme confirmed her identity by sharing personal details and accurately described the home she had escaped from, along with the name of her abductor. Soon after, police intercepted Patterson as he was driving back to the cabin. He surrendered without resistance. When arrested, he simply said, "I know why you're here." He didn't ask for a lawyer, didn't deny the charges, and confessed everything during the first interrogation. Jayme was taken to a local hospital for a medical checkup. She had no major injuries, wasn't severely malnourished, but was clearly in psychological shock. She was later reunited with her relatives, a moment intensely followed by national media. Police immediately launched a full-scale investigation at Patterson's cabin in Gordon, located over 100 kilometers from the crime scene. The house sat deep in the woods, with no close neighbors, no surveillance, no cell signal, and completely isolated. Inside, investigators found evidence of Jayme's captivity: an old bed, containers placed to block her from moving, heavy objects like concrete blocks and metal chairs. They also recovered evidence linked to the murders: the Mossberg shotgun, duct tape, a face mask, and other items Patterson had used. During further questioning, Jake Patterson confessed in detail, almost without hesitation. He said he first saw Jayme when she was getting on her school bus, when he worked briefly at the Jenny O turkey plant, where her parents also worked. He didn't know her name, didn't know where she lived, but in that moment, he had the thought that she was the perfect target. From then on, he began planning, buying a mask, shaving his head to avoid leaving DNA, removing his car's license plates, and conducting surveillance on the Closs home. He even made 2 earlier attempts, but gave up when he saw too many people around. On his 3rd try, in the early hours of October 15th, he made the decision to kill anyone who got in his way. He brought a shotgun, wore black clothing, drove without plates, and executed the plan in less than 5 minutes. After abducting Jayme and returning to the cabin, Patterson kept her in a bedroom and constantly threatened that if she ran or screamed, he would kill her. Whenever he left or someone visited, he forced her under the bed, surrounding her with heavy items and warning her not to make a sound. She later said she sometimes went without food or had to lie still for hours without moving. She didn't know what day it was, where she was, and had no access to any electronic devices. However, Patterson never sexually assaulted her. Both his confession and the investigation confirmed there were no acts of rape or sexual misconduct. He kept her simply as an object, something he owned and controlled. But in silence, Jayme began to take mental notes: where the doors were, what the engine sounded like, what Patterson's routines were. Every hour that passed was part of her plan to escape. News of Jayme's escape and Patterson's arrest spread rapidly across the U.S. The Barron community, who had previously held prayer vigils and organized search parties, erupted in joy and shock. No one could believe that a 13-year-old had survived 88 days in total isolation and managed to escape on her own. Psychological experts noted that Jayme's survival instincts were incredibly rare. She not only remained sane, but also alert enough to observe, remember the cabin's location, describe it clearly to police, and act at the only possible moment Patterson let his guard down. When the story was made public, residents of Gordon, where Patterson lived, were stunned. Neighbors said they rarely saw him. He had lived with his father for a short time, then moved to a family-owned cabin. No one suspected anything. No noise, no suspicious behavior, no signs of violence or mental illness. He had once enlisted in the Marines, but was discharged after a few weeks without explanation. He had no criminal history, no public social media, and no close friends. He was invisible in the community, and that made him all the more dangerous. Patterson was charged with 4 felonies, 2 counts of first-degree intentional homicide, 1 count of kidnapping, and 1 count of armed burglary. On March 27, 2019, Patterson pleaded guilty in Barron County Court. No contest, no excuses, no visible remorse. On May 25, 2019, Patterson was sentenced to 2 life terms without the possibility of parole, plus 40 years for the kidnapping charge. The judge called it one of the most senseless and brutal crimes he had seen in his career. Jayme did not attend the hearing. However, in a letter to the court, she wrote, "He thought he could own me, but I'm stronger. I won't let him take away my future." The room fell silent. A 13-year-old girl who had witnessed her parents' murder, been abducted, held captive for 88 days, still had the strength to reclaim her freedom and speak for herself.
After Jake Patterson was sentenced to life in prison, the case of Jayme Closs was legally closed, but its impact continued to spread across the United States. This was no ordinary crime. It stood as a chilling example of how evil can emerge without warning when an ordinary girl from a quiet small-town family became the random target of a complete stranger after a single glance. Patterson didn't know Jayme's name, didn't know where she lived, but he planned, waited, and struck in total silence. Not for money, not for revenge, but to satisfy a strange, unexplainable urge: total control. After her escape, Jayme was taken in by relatives and moved away from Barron to avoid the media spotlight and regain some privacy. She received specialized psychological therapy and stayed out of the public eye. Her extended family and close friends shared little with the media, giving her space to heal. Those who worked directly with her described Jayme as remarkably strong, sharp, and mature beyond her years.
She remembered the smallest details of the cabin, Patterson's behavior, and timed her escape perfectly, choosing the one moment when he let his guard down. Experts called her survival instincts almost extraordinary, especially for a 13-year-old. Soon after, the FBI held a closed briefing analyzing this case as a rare example. They emphasized how unusual it was. No prior warning signs, no clear motive, no criminal history, and a perpetrator completely unknown to the victim. This raised serious concerns among law enforcement. The usual red flags that help identify or prevent crimes, troubled history, domestic connection, psychological profile, were largely absent. Patterson lived a quiet, reclusive life, had no mental health record, didn't engage socially, and left no visible digital footprint. He was the most dangerous type of offender, unpredictable, undetectable, and unnoticed. Another lasting aspect of the Jayme Closs case was the community's emotional response. After she returned home, thousands gathered in Barron for a candlelight vigil. Students, police officers, and local residents filled the field at Jayme's middle school. Signs hung along the streets, with slogans like "Jayme Strong" posted across message boards. This was not just a solved crime, it was a symbolic victory for a small town that had spent 3 months paralyzed by fear, grief, and unanswered questions. As for Patterson, after sentencing, he was transferred to a high-security prison in New Mexico to avoid being attacked by other inmates. In letters later made public, Patterson expressed conflicting thoughts, sometimes admitting guilt, other times blaming his upbringing. He claimed he wanted to change, but couldn't explain why he did what he did. He didn't ask for forgiveness and showed no deep remorse. Criminal psychologists analyzing his behavior concluded that he displayed signs of antisocial personality disorder, ASPD, with traits of isolation, lack of empathy, and a cold, calculated approach to the crime. The absence of sexual motives or material gain made it even more disturbing because it revealed a crime driven purely by a desire for domination and possession. Lawmakers in Wisconsin, responding to this case, proposed changes to improve child safety in rural areas. Ideas included strengthening early alert systems, expanding public surveillance in remote zones, and increasing behavioral monitoring in schools. They recognized that had the crime occurred in a more populated area, the outcome might have been different. Patterson had exploited the quiet, low-density nature of Barron to commit the crime. No witnesses, no cameras, no patrol officers, the perfect setting for someone who wanted to be invisible. When asked later what lesson could be drawn from the case, the Barron County Sheriff said, "We've learned that evil doesn't need a reason, and even in the darkest hour, sometimes the light still finds a way out." That quote perfectly captured the essence of this case. Jayme had witnessed her parents being killed, had been abducted, isolated, controlled, and forced to live in silence and darkness, but she still found a way to survive and escape. Today, Jayme lives a quiet life, far from the public eye, with no public social media accounts. Her family protects her privacy fiercely. In one rare update, a relative shared that she was back in school, living a relatively stable life, and receiving regular therapy. No one knows what the future holds, but one thing is certain: she survived, she fought back, and she reclaimed her life from a cold-blooded killer. No one can undo what Jayme went through, but by standing up, moving forward, and choosing silence over spectacle, she sent the strongest message of all. Life does not bow to darkness. And in this case, it was Jayme, not the killer, who had the final say. If you believe stories like this are worth remembering and that raising awareness could help others avoid similar dangers, please subscribe to this channel, share this video, and leave a comment if it made you reflect. Your attention and vigilance are the only things that ensure cases like these are not forgotten.